Basically talks about the life of paradise that we would have here as long as we followed those original instructions. We'd have this paradise condition here. This paradise condition did exist. We are convinced this paradise condition will return after this great purification day. We had to go through a period of 4 days, which turned out to be 400 years, testing and temptation and tribulation, to see if we really understood our original instructions and if we could live up to them, no matter what happened. And this, I guess, was our final examination period for this era. Then, of course, Purification Day comes upon us. We find a chain of prophecies centered on this spindle. And they said, you know, someday, just before Purification Day, we'll see objects or machines rolling across the ground on round things like this, referring to the little flywheel, spindle wheel, on round things like this with animals pulling it. And that's the time to get ready for the great testing and trial and tribulation, because it'll soon be upon us. Then after a while, you'll see these machines rolling across the ground with nothing pulling them. These self-propelled machines will get to going so fast and become so popular that they will build special trails for them. And these trails will cut the land all up like a cobweb. And when you use the phrase cut the land up, right away the listener knows that that's bad, evil from the destroyer, because that's one of the things we promised not to do, was to cut the land up. It's a gross violation of Creator's law and order to cut up the land, especially to buy and sell it. Land is here for the purpose of producing and sustaining life. It's not to be a commodity of merchandise or to get rich off of. It would cut the land up like a cobweb, these different trails. And there'd be two main types of trails. One type would be 2 strips of metal, and if you stand on it and look down it, these parallel strips of metal look like they come together way off there, but they don't really come together, it just looks that way. And over that trail, these machines would be tied one behind the other, and from a distance it would look like a great caterpillar or snake going across the land. And in those machines, or in that machine, there would be whole villages of people moving. The other type of trail would be smooth, oftentimes black. It would look almost like rivers going out there. In fact, if you stand on this type of trail and look down it, oftentimes it'll look like water out there ahead of you. It won't really be water, it'll just look that way. Alright, these trails would get so numerous they cut the land all up like a cobweb. Then somebody would invent a roadway in the sky, and you begin to see these machines floating overhead, and eventually those floating machines would become so perfected that you would see whole villages of people floating overhead. And how that great spirit knew in that early day that someday there'd be a main transcontinental air route between Los Angeles and Chicago that would go directly over the Hopi villages, I don't know. But I do know that if you planned those villages 10 miles farther to the south, or perhaps 10 miles farther to the north, they wouldn't have seen these villages of people floating overhead. And I can see now how that prophecy has been fulfilled. Now, at that time then, somebody would invent a gourd full of ashes. And here they held their hands to show about how big that gourd full of ashes would be. Later on, I found out that the interior of an atomic bomb, the actual working parts, take away the shielding, it's just about that size. A gourd full of ashes, which, if it was ever dropped from this roadway in the sky and it hit the earth, it would boil the water and burn the land and leave ashes over a wide area where nothing would grow for many years. And if that ever happened, that was to be the signal for certain Hopi leaders to stand up and begin declaring their message to the world.
I think we should distinguish, like the Buddhists, between the way of powers and the way of wisdom. The way of powers reaches out to an almost godlike control of circumstances. But if its ambitions could ever be attained, if what we call the will or ego could be master of the world, our lives would be as tedious as making love to a plastic woman. Is that what we really want? Think it through. Would you genuinely like to be immortal, omniscient, and omnipotent, knowing all and remembering all, without rest or forgetting, forever and ever? The way of wisdom, on the other hand, is concerned not so much with power as with self-discovery. Who am I? And what is really going on? And this way leads to the understanding that my true self is in fact the vast and inconceivable space out of which this universe is produced. My body, your bodies, are points at which it becomes aware of itself, like sparks of flame coming and going on the back of the fires. And since variety is the spice of life, it takes a different point of view with each one of us, and then keeps on letting go of itself in what we call death, so that the process is not dulled by monotony and boredom. There is therefore no need for you to rule the world, because you're doing it already. But this you is not what you have learned to think of as you, not your ego or personality. These are no more than extremely incomplete images of yourself. Because then he knows who he is, the wise one is not ambitious with power. But then, how do we get this knowledge? How can we actually feel ourselves, not as poor little me, but as the background of the universe? Well, of course, you, as you think of yourself, can't do it at all. Because this you is only an image, an ideal. There's no more reality than Tuesday or an inch. If this is understood, the rest is silence. There is nothing left to do but be clearly and vividly aware of what is happening, without comment, without putting it into words, without asking questions. This is what we call meditation or contemplation. Simply being aware of truth, reality, or what is, in silence, without talking to yourself. In this state, it will be seen that, in fact, there is neither past nor future, but just eternal now. Any difference between yourself and what you are experiencing vanishes. There is just this happening. Watch your breathing. Are you doing it? Or does it happen to you? Neither. There is just this going.